Good afternoon, I'm Jeremy Eccles, and today I'm going to give a talk on the philosophy and ideology of Leo Tolstoy. The most important period of Tolstoy's life as far as this talk is concerned is his religious conversion and ladder. Although I think it would be helpful contextually to have some biographical information of his earlier life, our time will not permit it, so we'll start with his religious conversion. After the great success of Tolstoy's War and Peace, followed with Anna Karenina, Tolstoy becomes very depressed and disillusioned with his life and his spirituality. And these events would lead him to the final and perhaps most important stage, which is his religious conversion, and then followed by his ascension into somewhat of a spiritual leader. Tolstoy initially had sought answers from within the Russian Orthodox Church, but eventually he came to believe that the church was corrupt, and this led him to determine that he needed to develop his own system of beliefs. So Tolstoy puts out a nonfiction called A Confession, and up until this point Tolstoy writes that he has found satisfaction through caring for his family and also through his art, which is what he calls his writing. After achieving great financial wealth and social status, Tolstoy says that life has become meaningless. After seeking answers from the church, from science, from philosophy, and other writers, Tolstoy eventually he finds his answers in the irrational religious conviction of the simple peasants, and that's the way that Tolstoy puts it in A Confession. And Tolstoy was eventually excommunicated from the Russian Orthodox Church due to his deviation from the church's doctrine, and this was a painful event within Tolstoy's life for his family and for his wife and Tolstoy himself. Another nonfiction that's very important is The Gospel in Brief. And Tolstoy's beliefs here are based on the teachings of Jesus Christ, and in particular Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which you can find in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. So in this writing, Tolstoy combines the four biblical Gospels into one to clarify the teachings of Jesus. Tolstoy pretty much rejects the deity of Christ along with the resurrection and any miracles that Jesus does, but he instead attributes 5 commandments to the teachings of Jesus, and not all of which are even explicitly stated by Christ, but this is Tolstoy's implication of what Tolstoy's boiling down Jesus Christ's teachings to. So Tolstoy also, in the meantime, he's practicing asceticism, pacifism. He's a vegetarian. He also practices chastity, even though he's got 13 children, but that was prior to his religious conversion. He abstains from alcohol and tobacco. He wears very simple peasant clothes as part of his ascetic lifestyle, and he spends much of his time teaching the poor along with his vast number of disciples at his home. And Tolstoy attempted to give away all his possessions many times, but this was continually thwarted by his wife and his children. Tolstoy's wife also disapproved of his religious teachings, and those two things, him getting rid of his possessions and his religious teachings in general, that remained a constant source of turmoil throughout Tolstoy's life, and turmoil with his wife. Another important nonfiction of Tolstoy's is The Kingdom of God is Within You. And this is a major writing of Tolstoy in which he lays out the principles of his Christian anarchist thinking. The most important idea expressed here is that of his espousal of protest through nonviolence. And Tolstoy believed that the church was complicit with the state in its policies of waging war, and Tolstoy found that these two ideas are totally antithetical to Christ's teaching. And Tolstoy also believed that the Apostle Paul had been instrumental in the church's deviation from Jesus' teaching, in that Paul in the New Testament often implores the early Christians to allow the government to submit to their authority. And Tolstoy's general ideas on passive resistance have been extremely influential in the lives of many social and religious leaders, including Gandhi and also Martin Luther King. And Gandhi and Tolstoy corresponded concerning Tolstoy's ideas on nonviolence. And in fact, Tolstoy, the last letter that Tolstoy wrote was to Gandhi. So Tolstoy was influential to Gandhi, and then Gandhi was quite influential to Martin Luther King. So in conclusion, I'd like to reiterate that I think that Tolstoy's legacy is a product of his sophisticated mind. And in the light of his influence on the leaders such as Martin Luther King and Gandhi, I think it's safe to say that Tolstoy's most enduring ideas are those of his nonviolent protest. And also, I'd like to reiterate the importance that he gave to the teachings of Jesus Christ. So Gandhi used Tolstoy's ideas to change the Eastern world, and Martin Luther King used those same ideas to affect the Western world. So those two things just tell us that Tolstoy is an intellectual giant, the likes of which mankind will rarely encounter. Thank you very much.